Hello everybody, it's AJ of the Mighty Glue Stick, and this weekend, for this video update, it's a request to basically talk about Lovecraft, HP Lovecraft, and the Lovecraftian mythos within Dungeons & Dragons. And I'm just going to give you an overview and not go into specifics, like what monsters are definitely Lovecraftian themed and things like that, like illithids and aboleths and that sort of thing. And the gods, Dagon and various others are in there. But talk about the broad overreaching themes of Lovecraftian mythos and how it shaped what D&D became. So back in the days when Dungeons & Dragons was invented, there was a lot of change in the culture of the United States and the world in many ways, particularly the Western world, and that they were coming out of the 1950s and that strict sort of everybody toe the line mindset. And people were starting to experiment with drugs and alternate cultures and lifestyles, and a lot of it was very subversive, and it scared authorities and things. Part of that was just due to people wanting to break out of what they saw as a rut or a grind or some such. And Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing games in general have been a vehicle, an excellent vehicle, where you don't need drugs, you don't need cults and that sort of thing, you don't need strong religious overtones and things to experiment in what it would be to live in a different reality as a different person, to change your mindset without even, without altering anything, just with your imagination, the power of the imagination. And so it drew a lot of influences from various different bodies of work, speculative fiction and horror fiction. And H.P. Lovecraft definitely had a long and strong legacy as being both an American writer and also a consummate. Well, he wasn't the best writer in the world. I mean, everybody admits he wasn't the best writer. But he was a fairly prodigious writer, and he dedicated his life to it. He died at the age of 46, basically from cancer of his small intestine and malnutrition, because he really didn't earn a lot of money, and he was basically just living on his trust fund. And he was a reclusive sort of guy. A lot of his attitude to things towards ethnicity and race and things were predominant at the time. I mean, a lot of people talk about how he was quite bigoted, but it was actually fairly commonplace in America back in those days. It was a lot more closed-minded and cloistered than America is today, believe it or not. So, yeah, and a lot of his genre of his writing that he kind of is synonymous with is this mythos. So when H.P. Lovecraft looked at the world, he wanted to see deeply into things. He had a questing mind that was starved of understanding, because the scientific marvels that we have today were just being dreamed about back then. The idea of cell phones and things like that would have boggled his mind. So his fantasies were dark, gothic, horrific. And his science fiction was weird and wondrous and cosmic in nature. When he looked out into the stars, he didn't see limitless possibilities. He saw limitless unknowns, and unknown stuff breeds horror. So to him, he could understand that human beings were a speck in the cosmic scale of things, and there must be vaster things out there. If life was to exist at all, it could have been around for millions and millions of years before human beings even existed. They could have walked on the earth back before dinosaurs were here. They could have caused mass extinctions. And as we move into a new period of human exploration and understanding of how life is possibly propagating through the galaxy, some of Lovecraft's thoughts may in fact echo a lot of what the reality of life in the galaxy actually is, that it can propagate on its own, kind of as a natural force without actual living things doing anything about it. So yeah, that's interesting. That's subject for another video entirely. But back to Dungeons and Dragons. So in the where Gary Gygax gets this idea for Lovecraft and how it really plays its part in the cosmology of Dungeons and Dragons is if you go back and you watch my video on the Oberonth, which are In a nutshell, they are creatures from another universe, a dying universe. So it's entirely detached. So it's not connected through other dimensions or anything like that. It's an entirely different cosmos. Imagine it's a big bubble, and those individuals in there, the Oberonth, somehow created a gap between two different universes and managed to travel through. So they have a completely different set of physical laws and things, variant laws, that don't mesh up with things in this the physical universe of Dungeons and Dragons. The Dungeons and Dragons universe encompasses multiple planes of existence, parallel dimensions, layers and layers and layers of reality wrapped up inside themselves. So the way dimensions work is they're not. I know it's the average human being looks at a dimension as something away from you, when in actual fact dimensions are inside things. So they're wrapped up in the world that you're walking around in is all there is, and there's more complexity inside there, more and more and more and more, almost infinite amounts of layers of superimposed holographic universes within universes within universes, which are these dimensions. And yeah, if you look at the abyss is not a place, it's an onion layers of places which are wrapped up in themselves. So yeah, the Oberonth tunneled through into the D&D universe right back in the beginning and created chaos. And the forces of law and order fought against them. And it's that fight of law and order personified as these beings that we play out in the Dungeons and Dragons world as gods and demons and devils and things. So that's really cool. The idea that of cosmic horror shaping the very reality that ordinary mortal creatures must walk around in, and their interests being so vast and beyond, and disregarding mortality and mortal creatures and their wants and dreams, that it's possible for a novice adventurer to be confronted by a vast godlike intelligence, which is millions and millions of years old, which has no regard for that mortal's existence at all. And so ways to incorporate it into Dungeons and Dragons, you come up with the idea of cults and necromancy and alternate planes of existence, the hell dimensions, the abyss, like the floor in the universe, the alternate material planes like the Feywild and the Shadowfell, and the schisms and splits between law and chaos, or the elemental planes or the elemental chaos. And then you have these angelic orders which are fighting against this disarray that's been introduced into the Dungeons and Dragons universe. You can imagine that once upon a time, everything was like Elysium and the Seven Heavens and that sort of stuff. Once upon a time, the universe was basically perfect, but it did so suppressing natural chaos, and the natural chaos is embodied in the primordials and things that you see who partook in the Dawn War. And the primordials really are just independent gods. They're gods that bootstrap themselves into a state of existence. They may have been influenced by the Oberonths coming over into the universe, or they may have already existed. But they're essentially just things that popped into existence, who'd had no limitations on what they could be, what their potential was. So you have primordials which are so large and powerful, they can swallow stars. And in fact, that's what happened in the Forgotten Realms at one point. Its sun was swallowed by Dendo the Night Serpent. So this epic mythology, this ability to piece together awesome tapestry of different lore, and actually understanding the conflicts of the gods and things, and being able to spin religions and cults and things out of it, is incredibly rich. And we can thank HP Lovecraft for this idea of cosmic horror and its place in Dungeons and Dragons, and also Gary Gygax drawing upon all of the literary sources, so Vancian, Jack Vance's magic system for incorporating magic and expendable spell slots and things like that. Conan type, the idea of having a sword-strapped warrior who can, eventually best cosmic horrors. That sort of idea is very much tied in with what was his name, Howard, and yeah, It's really good. So as for H.P. Lovecraft and his mythos, the mythos was never he didn't do it as one big cohesive work. It just sort of turned into a series of themes that carried over from one thing to another, and there was actually a lot of you could say paranoia in his writing, his distrust of the natural world, and feeling like there was horrible things that we couldn't see lurking around every corner. That at some point there was a distability to things, that a veneer of normalcy overhanging a cliff of cosmic uncertainty, and his life was precarious and kind of lonely, really. So yeah, in many ways, I feel kind of sorry for H.P. Lovecraft, but he was a very complicated individual, and interesting in that because he did so much correspondence, writing to different people, he presented himself in his writing very personably. So you can really understand him in a lot of ways if you read his letters and things. He's very well expressed. So you could sort of piece together who this person was. Just from the legacy of an outpouring of thought that he has, which is quite interesting. And it's been a theme in my past week where I've been reading things about where writing comes from and things like that. That and how language changes and things. There's a guy with a YouTube channel called Professor Jackson Crawford, and he talks about the origin of language, particularly Scandinavian languages. I have an interest in that, obviously. And his translation of the Eddas, the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, and also how they reconstruct ancient Norse, and how the language has changed, and languages, linguistics change over time, and also how languages become part of cultures. So the ideas that words encapsulate become filtered through into language and society and culture. For example, I was watching something the other day which is talking about the very first writing, and it was a lady who lived in Mesopotamia in ancient Iraq, where the very first writing attributed by somebody writing their signature. So she was the first person to write her name under something that she wrote, and her voice 4,000 years later is present in us today. We can still hear her thoughts. So she immortalized herself through writing and passed on these various ideas which later, like for instance in the Epic of Gilgamesh and things, there was an individual he found who had built a boat to survive a worldwide flood, and this story of a worldwide flood and a guy building a boat to save himself and his family and animals and things is echoed again as it was borrowed and put into the Bible in the story of Noah. So thousands of years later, thanks to the writing of ancient people in Iraq and the story of the first hero, Gilgamesh. If you don't believe me, go and look it up yourself. It's very clearly there. So the idea that Dungeons and Dragons borrowed a lot from Cthulhu mythos without it being Cthulhu mythos, but the fact that it influenced Dungeons and Dragons on a fundamental level, because H.P. Lovecraft was talking about weirdness and oddity and stuff outside of reality. And when you're creating a fantasy world from scratch, you draw upon everything that influences you. And the stuff that he thought was cool was, alien horrors, squid-faced monsters, great undersea creatures, otherworldly demons, and great gods, and cultists, and snake cults, and temples and lost in jungles, and ancient artifacts with intelligences buried inside them, malevolence, and persevered in the form of items which were imbued with the long lost essence of ancient sorcerers. Slumbering gods and ancient powerful beings who could be awoken by breaking into their crypts, or when the time was right and the stars aligned, ancient vortices would open up, or fey portals would shed alien light, and twilight music would play as they pranced out and stole children. these sort of themes are all present in Dungeons and Dragons. And H.P. Lovecraft created worlds, many different ideas of cosmic horror that brought darkness and uncertainty to the nature of fantasy. He said that, things that sleep eternally will never die. And I love all of his stories. I've read many, if not all of them. I don't think I've read all of his stories, but I've certainly read a lot of them. And so introducing the ideas, like Monty Cook wrote a pretty good article where he was talking about how much fun it was to incorporate H.P. Lovecraft's themes into your games, such as setting adventures in the asylums and introducing the idea of madness being a trait that could your character could be worn down to the point of madness. And having played lots of a couple of Call of Cthulhu games, I know just how fun it is to roleplay a character who is going crazy. You can have evil wizards that cast shriveling spells on people, so that you're decaying as you go, and you're in a mad dash against this malevolent magic which you can't get, like curses and things like that, that are working against you. And so the time and the pace of the story is entirely different because you're racing against something which is hampering you as you go. Introducing the idea of the Meego, so alien creatures which come to the world who have been there for a very, very long time, and the modern human beings and other races of Dungeons and Dragons could be interlopers on what they consider to be their world. Some of the giant versus dragon mythos within Dungeons and Dragons is very much like that, where the giants consider themselves to be the true inhabitants of the world, and the smaller races are young imposters who have usurped their authority. You can make the Sahulgan deep ones, and the misbegotten creatures of the deep, directly out of the horror out of Innsmouth. That's the idea of there being a deep god that you can never actually see in the story, but you have this town full of people who are transforming into horrific fish folk. Using multiple casters to work out dark rituals and cultists. Staging encounters in stone circles and ancient monuments that may actually be empowering as cosmic forces align, and treating Lovecraftian gods as long-forgotten, still powerful demons for the PCs to battle in the form of Oberonths and things like that. In high-level games, clerics can cast earthquakes and can stir up creatures that have been bound in the earth, and that sort of thing. So go nuts. I suggest you read a bit about Lovecraft and incorporate it into your game as Gygax did. Thanks for listening, everyone.